Let's turn our attention now to Texas. So Brandi, I invite you to turn on your camera and join me as we discuss the REL Southwest partnership with TEA. As we go along, audience members, please enter any questions you may have into the chat box, and we'll address as many as we can during the Q&A session a bit later. So we launched the Texas Education Agency Tri-Agency Workforce Priorities, or TTWP, partnership in 2022 to support the governor's Tri-Agency Workforce Initiative. The goal of the initiative is to ensure that all Texas students have the education and training they need to fill in-demand, high-wage jobs now and in the future. As part of the initiative, the Texas Education Agency, or TEA, committed to the strategic priority of strengthening systems of support for high-quality advising and counseling so that all Texas students are prepared for success in college and careers. To this end, TEA developed the Effective Advising Framework to provide districts with a blueprint for implementing comprehensive advising with their students. TEA also requested support from the REL Southwest to ensure that these efforts would be informed by evidence. Through discussion with the chair of the Tri-Agency Organizational Committee, we determined that this priority would have the most immediate impact on Texas students. To support Texas in implementing the EAF, the TTWP partnership is providing TEA with 3 types of support that you can see here. Coaching, training, and technical support includes co-development of a rubric for districts to use in selecting high-quality advising materials, and identification of evidence-based grade level expectations to support students' career development. Our research project will examine various aspects of the implementation of effective advising practices in districts that are using the EAF. Finally, we're also convening this fall an advisory group of key individuals involved in supporting EAF implementation. Brandi, I'm going to turn things over to you now for a brief overview of the EAF.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here and talk about effective advising and what's going on in Texas. So if you can go to the next slide. In Texas, we've recognized that effective advising is one of the key components of a high quality pathway connecting education to industry. So we realized that when we're talking about high quality career and educational pathways, that effective advising is a key part of that. It is a key component. And so from that sort of came this development of the effective advising framework. So if you can see on the next slide that the effective advising framework is an integrated approach to creating and developing your individual planning system within the comprehensive school counseling program. So in Texas, we do have in statute that districts should have a comprehensive school counseling program. That program has 4 components, as you can see here in the graphic on the screen, one of those being individual planning. So the effective advising framework is sort of a double click into individual planning and how to develop that system. So that's how we sort of like anchor our program in legislation. So the effective advising framework is really driven by relationships between all stakeholders, including our students and families and partners that are even outside of the school building. We also really encourage regular touch points so that we are monitoring and tracking the progress that's occurring within the system. So when we talk about the effective advising framework, it is a K-12 framework and it is somewhat high level. So it's not prescriptive so much as descriptive, right? So kind of helping put into place a lot of those things that Scott was talking about. So currently we are piloting the effective advising framework through grants. So we have 4 grants this year. If you're familiar with Texas at all, we have 20 educational service centers, regions in Texas, 20 regions. And so we enlist them for support in coaching districts through the effective advising framework. So we have a planning grant where our coaches at the service centers go through the process of coaching 2 to 4 districts through a year of planning. And then as districts complete those years of that year of planning, they're then eligible for implementation grants. So they actually receive funds. The district receives direct funds to implement some of the high need areas that they identified within planning. And they still receive coaching from EAF coaches, as we call them, from the regional service centers. And if you're wondering, how do the regional service center coaches know what to do? Well, they receive training from TEA and our vendor partner in terms of how to coach through the process of planning and what does implementation look like. We support them with supplemental resources such as a diagnostic tool and a gap analysis to really help them discover the alignment of the things that they're already doing. How does that fit into the model? And then also, what are the gaps that we need to work on and fill? So let's look at the levers, right? What is the EAF? So there are 5 high prioritized levers. Number 1 being strong program leadership and planning. So that's established in the planning year, where we're talking about who are these key individuals, what is the organizational structure, what goals, what metrics, things like that. And then lever 2 is effective, well-supported school counselors and advisors. So how do we retain and recruit a strong advising staff? Lever 3 is enlisting that internal school culture of advising, where we say that, yes, the advising program is owned by school counselors, it's led by them, but not all the work is done by them, right? We really have to talk about all of the staff members, everyone understanding what effective advising is and playing a role in that. And then lever 4, effective external partnerships, where we fill in those gaps that have been identified in their system. And then lever 5 is high quality advising materials and assessment. So we're sort of making sure that that districts have quality materials for their students and parents and families.
And Brandi, I think for us in our partnership, we've worked closely with you on lever 5 in particular, in terms of developing some of those resources for districts to be able to use. I'm curious too, what else does the EAF include besides the levers that we see here?
Yeah, so, and let me speak to the rubric that we've created in lever 5 as well. So we worked with REL to create a rubric to how do we define what quality advising assessments and materials are. So we've been asking that question and finding those answers through research. So in terms of the levers also consist of essential actions. And those are those things that districts should be doing to implement these levers. And each essential action also has key practices. So it's really granular in terms of what are the look-fors, right? What are we going to see if the districts are implementing these things with fidelity? And then all of these, the levers and what they consist of, kind of hinge and set on district commitments. So we have some statements that district administrators sort of find that buy-in and what their roles are in terms of providing support and management of the advising system. So we talk a lot about how do we measure success in advising, right? How do we measure that we're being successful? So there's several things that we're looking at. The first of that being student outcomes, those such as our college, career, and military readiness indicators, like dual credit completion, AP completion, things like that, post-secondary enrollment metrics, as well as FAFSA completion. But we also look at some specific student outcomes. So on the 3rd bullet there, it talks about our specific grade level expectations. So that's where we have grade level expectations that are set in each grade level that lead towards certain milestones and transitions for students. And so our districts are also measuring the completion of those expectations once they set them. And we actually look at academic, career, and financial literacy for those, as they all lead towards post-secondary planning and success. So looking at those outcomes, one example would be like the completion of an individual career and academic plan. Is that occurring at what points, right? And then another thing we look at is satisfaction and feedback surveys from all of our stakeholders, student families, district staff, even from the coaches at the service centers that are doing that work. So the EAF was established in 2020 and began being piloted in 2021. And you can see we started with 8 ESCs. So we had 1 or more EAF coaches in 8 ESCs through the grants that worked with 18 districts across Texas. We have since expanded into implementation and all the way into 14 service centers for this school year. I'm working with 66 districts. You can see kind of the 14 service centers indicated on the map there. So we're just spreading right along Texas. So we started with some rural districts, more so in smaller schools, and we've definitely started expanding into more urban areas and larger districts with multiple high schools. So seeing what that looks like implemented across a very large district. And lastly, if you have any questions or want any more information, we do have an advising webpage at TEA that has updates on the EAF, but we also have an EAF website now, which launched at the end of last year. It has printable resources. You can actually find all the levers along with essential actions, key practices, and further information on our support and tools that we have.
Thank you, Brandi. And we'll be sharing these resources. They're in the chat right now, and they'll also be in the archived presentation.